Today I'm going to be discussing chapter 16, um, which is basically going to cover saving objects. So how objects can be flattened and inflated. So we're going to do that using serialization and deserialization. So yeah, basically chapter 16 is all about saving and loading data into Java, especially objects and text. It introduces serialization, which is saving objects, and deserialization, which is loading them back. So building them up to the created object we had at first. Plus how to read and write text files. So, firstly, what is an object state? Object state refers to the value stored in an object's variable. So, for instance, you'll have a dog object, and in parentheses you will have basically the name of the dog and the age of the dog. That's the state of that object. We have serialization, which is to turn an object into a stream of bytes so it can be saved to a file or sent over a network. So think of it like freeze drying an object. So you basically turning it into stream bytes so that you can save it to a file. And later on, when you want to use it, you load that file again. You load the stream bytes, rebuild the stream bytes into an object, and use that object again. That's where deserialization takes place. We're rebuilding the object from the saved byte stream, like rehydrating the freeze dried object. That's basically what deserialization does. So they work in opposite. Serialization is to turn an object into a stream of bytes and save it to a file, whereas deserialization, you use it when you want to use that object again. So you have to rebuild those stream bytes into an object to reuse that object, say in another program. But you do that by reading the file and accessing it. We have a serializable interface. It's a marker interface with no method that tells Java your class can be serialized. You must implement this to save objects. Serial version UID is a unique ID for your class version. It helps Java know if the saved object matches the current class structure. Then we have text file IO, saving and reading plain text using classes like file writer, buffered reader, and file reader. So serialization just lets you save entire objects easily without manually writing each variable. Deserialization, on the other hand, restores that object that was serialized, preserving its state. So it restores that object and it restores the same state that it had before it was serialized. So in order to use serialization and deserialization, you need to use objects like object output stream, which helps with serialization. Object input stream helps with deserialization, file writer, and buffered reader. Alright, cool. So let's see how this works in our code. So I have created my own activity over here. It's basically a person class. It has a person object, which has fields, of course. Basically, there as they state. So firstly, we're gonna serialize that object and then deserialize that object and see how it works when it's passed into a file, and then we need to access that file to rebuild that object. So let's see how that works. So firstly, I have this class person. It implements serializable interface. Since it implements this interface, that means I can use methods that help with, I can use objects and classes that help with serializing an object and deserializing an object. So firstly, I declare over here static long variable serial version UID and set the serial version UID 1L over there. That's the UID. Then public string name, which is one of the fields, and integer age, which is one of the fields for the person. Then I have my person constructor, which has two parameters, name and age. Then I initialize those two fields, name and age, over here. I have my main method over here, and basically in the main method, this is where I create my person object, and I pass these two arguments, the name NL and the age 28. So when that happens, this constructor gets initialized, these fields get initialized, these parameters get the name and age that was passed here as arguments, and they get initialized over here by these fields. Now name and age has, and now is the name, 28 as the age. So now we have our person object over here. So now that we have that, we want to basically serialize this object so that we can place it within the file, right? So that it can be used later on by anyone who wants to use that specific object. So in order to do that, we use object in this try. We have a try block, and we use this object output stream object over here. In parentheses, we pass the new file output stream. What this basically does is it's gonna save the it's gonna basically access the person bin file, and when it's able to access it, it basically writes the object, which is this object, to this file. In order to write the object to this file, it needs to use write object p, which is referring to this reference variable, which is basically the object in itself. And what we're gonna do is it's gonna serialize that specific object, turn it into byte streams, and save it to this file over here. And then it shows object serialized successfully. If that doesn't take place, this catch block runs, showing the error. So now that the file is here, right, as we can see, this is it. It's saved, that object is saved as a byte stream in the file so that it can be used later on. So in order to use it, we need to deserialize it. How we do that is we read the object from the file. So we do that by placing this try block, and within it we have the object input stream over here, which is basically gonna access the file and read the object that is in the form of stream bytes. Using new file input stream here, we access the person bin file so we can read the object. Then over here is how we rehydrate the object or rebuild the object. So we have person loaded over here. It's gonna be basically recreating the object. We pass person here over here so that it can basically still have the same state that the object had at first, and then use in.read object to read the bytes in that object and to basically rebuild that object, which is saved here to loaded. Then system.out.print line, we basically print loaded name is loaded age, meaning that it will still have the original state of the object, such as the name and the age. Why? Because we passed the person object over here, which is represented here, when we were basically deserializing the object. And then if that doesn't run, this catch block runs, showing the error. So yeah, that's basically how it works. So the serialization process of it is to serialize the object, turn it into stream bytes, save it to this file, so that we can use it later. Later when we use it, we basically deserialize it, access that file using a read object, and change it into an object again, from a stream byte to an object, so we can use those initial states that it had at first. So at first it will show object serialized successfully over here, and now that it's serialized, we can access it using object input stream and new file input stream, and once that happens, we can access the states, print it out, and we get, and now is 28. That's basically a summary of chapter 16. Cool.